This next video is from the Democracy at Work YouTube channel. It's the great economist Richard Wolff. He does a fantastic job.
Yes, the great economist Richard Wolff. Here Kyle is again in less than a week, praising the Marxist economist Richard Wolff. And I want to recommend that everyone check out a video I made a few months ago. It's called Mixed Economy Moderates Are Useless. And the main target of this video is Cenk Uygur, although I do mention Kyle Kulinski. But the overall point I make in this video is that moderates and pragmatists like Kyle, they're ultimately useless in the long term because, eventually they will get pushed around by the radicals. They will get dragged to the extremes by the more consistent advocates of their premises. And we're seeing it right now with the way Kyle is taking a liking to Richard Wolff.
Fantastic job here going after the opponents of student loan debt forgiveness.
So my first comment as an economist answers the question, is this a feasible way of going about the problem?
Well, my question is this a moral thing to do? If someone takes out some money, if they borrow money and they are having trouble paying it back, is it okay for them to then steal money from other people to pay back their loans? Is it okay for them to vote for politicians who will use the force of law to steal money from other people to help pay off their loans? And I say absolutely not. Why stop at student loans? Why not go to car loans? Why not go to home mortgages? Why not go to credit cards? Anyone that has thousands of dollars in credit card debt, should they be bailed out too with taxpayer money? If someone bought a car that they could not afford with borrowed money, is it right to then raise taxes or impose a new tax on Americans to help pay off their car loans?
There the answer is an unqualified yes, of course. Is this doable? Yes. Would it solve the problem? Absolutely. Let's take a look. One of the questions raised about it is, oh my goodness, this is going to impact the economy because money that is...
It sure is going to impact the economy.
Now in the hands of stockbrokers and bankers and all of the people who speculate on Wall Street.
Apparently everyone that has money is either a stockbroker or a banker, according to Richard Wolff.
They won't have this money. Yes, that's true. They won't. But on the other hand, 50 to 100 million Americans who have no longer a student debt problem will be able to use the money they used to pay in their regular monthly payments.
50 to 100 million Americans? Is that how many people have student loans in America? Last time I checked, it was around 43 to 44 million Americans who currently have student loan debt. I wonder if Richard's confusing this number with the amount of people that have died from communism during the 20th century, but either way, it is amazing that this brilliant economist can't even get his numbers straight.
Payments on student debt to buy goods and services. So the loss...
Oh, buy goods and services. Economics is driven by production, not by spending, Richard.
One part of the economy is offset by the gain to another part.
I love this now. He's straight up admitting that there will be losses in the economy. But hey, the people who are losing over there, they'll be gaining over here. So it's all fun and good.
This is simple economics and ought not to be forgotten. Here's another way of saying the same thing. You're taking away money from the top, so it doesn't trickle down. But you're giving an economic boost to the average American who has a student debt. And that's money going to be spent by that person no longer on paying that debt, but on buying goods and services. That's money you might call trickling up. And the trickle up offsets the trickle down. So if you want to argue about the student debt, let's be honest. It is a program, not surprisingly coming from a socialist like Bernie Sanders, That's good for the average American, the vast majority.
Yes, continuing this perpetual state of pressure group warfare where politicians can arbitrarily decide to take money from some people and give it to others. That's just great for everyone.
Who either have student debt or face the burden of student debt if they want to help their kids get a college education. It helps them at the price of the 1% or the 5% at the...
So he's making a big deal about the top. He calls the top 1%, 5%. Hey, we're taking money from them. We're giving it to these other people over here. The top are getting screwed, but everyone else, all these other people are benefiting. Is this really about economics, or is it about class warfare? Given that he's a Marxist, I'm a little suspicious.
The top. One side benefits, the other side loses some.
See, he's straight up admitting this. One side benefits, one side loses. But it's good because it's the top that's losing and it's the bottom that's benefiting.
That just corrects what's been going on the last 40 years where the reverse has gone on. Or, to take a more recent example, the tax cut back in December of 2017 that enormously boosted the top, arguing that it would trickle down, which it didn't, rather than help the bottom, which is why Bernie and the others supporting his bill say, we bailed out, the people did, Wall Street. Back in 2008, 9, and 10, it's time for Wall Street to bail out.
See, this is not about economics. This is not about helping out some college students. This is about class warfare.
Bail out the American student. So is it economically feasible? Sure it is.
That was awesome. This actually reminded me of when Bernie went on Joe Rogan's podcast and Bernie spoke about free college, and Joe Rogan said, well, how are you going to pay for it? And his reaction was, Wall Street transaction tax.
How about no?
Yeah, Wall Street transaction tax. No big deal. Of course, they call it it's not really a Wall Street tax. It's a tax on all speculation and all trades and all investments on the stock market, whether you're buying stocks or bonds or index funds or mutual funds. See, they call it a Wall Street tax because when they present it, Kyle and Bernie and Richard Wolff, they want you to think of some douchebag like Leonardo DiCaprio's character from Wolf and Wall Street. They want you to think of him dressing up in his $500 well-tailored suit in the morning and putting on his nice Rolex watch and hopping in his nice brand new convertible and driving to his office so he can speculate, hey, that guy has a lot of money. He can afford to send every American to college, and he can afford to cancel student loan debt in America. Let's just take the money from him. That's what they want you to think of. But anyone that invests in the stock market, anyone that has a 401k or a Roth IRA, anyone that day trades, I day trade, I invest in the stock market. I buy stocks. I buy index funds. I have a Roth IRA, yet I don't live on Wall Street. I'm not driving around in a nice fancy convertible. But yeah, just make me pay for it, right, Kyle? Just put it on my tab. Make me pay more for stocks and bonds and mutual funds and all the rest. Yeah, have me send Kimmy to Arizona State so she can study English literature or whatever she wants to study while she gets blackout drunk twice a week with all of her sorority sisters. Yeah, no big deal or anything. And I looked into this tax that Bernie is proposing, and the experts anticipate that this, depending on the exact percentage, it could be as high as 0.5% on all transactions. It could raise anywhere between $700 billion and $1.2 trillion. Of course, this does not consider the fact that this tax is vulnerable to recessions and stock market corrections and turmoil in the stock market. What happens then? What happens when there's a bad year and people are not trading as much and investing as much, and therefore you're not getting all the cash flow? Where do you get the money then, Kyle? This also does not factor in that this tax will discourage speculation. It will discourage investment in the stock market because people don't want to spend more money than they have to. Transaction fees are a huge pain in the ass. They often discourage me from trading. Like one brokerage account I have, they charge $5 per transaction fee. Meaning if I want to say buy $500 worth of stock in Southwest Airlines, usually goes for about $50 a share. I want to buy 10 shares of Southwest Airlines. And I'm hoping to maybe sell this when it gets up to $55 a share. I'll make a $50 gain on this stock. Well, it will actually be a $40 gain because it will cost me $5 to buy the stock. Then it will cost me another $5 to sell the stock. So I'm going to lose $10 on whatever gain I make. But now if I'm making a $1,000 trade, if I'm buying $1,000 worth of stock, that's another $5 if it's 0.5%. And of course, I'm sure some of you at home, some of you Kyle fans might be thinking, oh, well, it's only $5, $10, $20 here and there. You can afford it. Stop your whining. And I say, kiss my ass. I don't care if it's $5. I don't care if it's $5,000. You're taking money from me, and why not put this tax on Kyle? Let's tax YouTube ad revenue and Patreon revenue. Of course, I'm sure Kyle would be on board with this tax, given that he's a good little bootlicking altruist. But yeah, Kyle, he's so happy to volunteer other people's money to pay for the programs that he wants. What a guy.
Like, I love how when he's given a forum to actually seriously discuss these issues, he could give you very solid, correct answers. But the whole point in mainstream media when they bring up something like, how are you going to pay for it? It's not because they're interested in the answer. It's because they're interested in trying to undercut and nip in the bud the idea that it should be taken seriously up front. Like, that's the point of...
Look at it, the way he presents this. He's making it sound like it's some conspiracy that the media dare ask Bernie Sanders how he's going to pay for all of his new programs. Like, that would be of no fucking interest to the American voter. Like, the American voter would not want to know how much more they're going to be paying in taxes. It's like Medicare for All. Kyle's a huge advocate for Medicare for All. It's going to add at least $3.2 trillion in spending. And I think voters might be curious to know how much more they're going to be paying in taxes. And according to that Mercatus study that Bernie and all of his comrades are running with, everyone's taxes are going up. You're going to need to more than double the individual income tax and double the corporate tax, and you're going to need to do more on top of that to pay for Medicare for all. And I read an article the other day that estimates that Americans that make between $50,000 and $80,000 per year are going to be paying $7,000 to $10,000 more in taxes if Medicare for all ever gets passed. Isn't that great, everyone? You're going to be paying more in taxes. And I actually brought this up to my buddy, Stephen Michael Davis, who I want to give a shout out to. He actually makes a lot of good TYT and Kyle rebuttal videos, so go check him out. I brought this up to Stephen Michael Davis, and he pointed out, it's funny because usually when you present this information to people in the polls, like when you say, hey, are you for Medicare for all? It is becoming a more popular program. But when you tell people that their taxes are going to go up dramatically, then support for Medicare for all falls off a cliff, just like any of these social programs. When you tell people that the programs that they apparently like are going to cause them to pay more in taxes, they suddenly get cold feet.
It's time for Who Do You Trust? Hubba, hubba, hubba. Money, money, money. Who do you trust? Me? I'm giving away free money.
And then Kyle over here acts like it's ridiculous for journalists and the media to ask Bernie Sanders how he's going to pay for his multi-trillion-dollar programs, as if voters don't give a shit.
That's the point of that. Because they never say, how are you going to pay for it when it comes to endless war and our expanding military budget. They never say, how are you going to pay for it when it...
Oh, yeah. No one ever asks about how much wars cost. And also, I've made this point before, if you wiped the military budget to zero, the government would still be in the red. They might barely get in the black, but what military spending is up to $700 billion now could probably stand a huge reduction. I mean, just a few years ago, it was under $600 billion and everything was fine. And I think deficit spending is currently at around $800 billion. So if you just wiped out military spending to zero, you might get in the black, and then you need to find the $1.5 trillion to cancel all of the student loan debt, on top of guaranteeing tuition-free college into the future, on top of Medicare for all, another $3.2 trillion, and the Green Leap Forward and however many trillions of dollars that's going to cost. And then Kyle acts like, oh, well, no one ever asked about military. Okay, wipe it to zero, and you still got to find the money, Kyle.
When it comes to a bailout of Wall Street, they just did it.
Oh, yeah, the Wall Street bailouts were not controversial at all. Yeah, it's not like there were mass protests called Occupy Wall Street. It's not like there are dozens of documentaries on Netflix raging about the issue. And not to defend the Wall Street bailouts, banking needs to be completely deregulated and banks should never be bailed out. But I think a lot of those banks did pay back the bailout money that they borrowed from the government. Again, not to defend it, but if a lot of the banks paid back the bailout money, then why not hold college students to the same standard? Either way, the government should not be in the business of lending people money and bailing people out of their financial troubles. And either way, a lot of people were pissed off about Wall Street. Let's not act like this wasn't a controversial issue.
Bat an eyelash. But in the case...
Yeah, no one batted an eyelash at the Wall Street bailouts. What a bunch of malarkey.
Anything for actual people, they're like, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? But when that question is...
Yeah, $3.2 trillion in Medicare spending, $1.5 trillion in student loan cancellations, and then however much money it's going to cost to fund tuition-free college going forward. Yeah, totally ridiculous to wonder how you're going to pay for that.
Question is asked in earnest, and you get the answer, people go, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. So I love that. And yeah.
Again, usually when you tell people that their taxes are going to go up dramatically, their support for these programs falls off.
Yeah, the idea of canceling student loan debt, I mean, yes, a generation is kind of being held back from fully participating in the economy.
They're just being held back. Students did not make a calculated decision to borrow this money. Presumably, these people borrowed this money after making the calculation that this is going to benefit their lives long term. Of course, Richard Wolff, I know, does not believe in self-interest. He doesn't think it's possible for people to know what's in their self-interest. But either way, I presume that the people that borrowed this money were doing so on the assumption that they're going to get an education, and that education is going to make them more employable, that education is going to help them get good jobs and make a lot of money to the point where paying the money back would be a minor, if not affordable, inconvenience. And college just acting like, oh, they're held back. Again, does someone who runs up their credit card, are they just being held back? If someone chooses to take out an auto loan they can't afford, are they being held back? If someone takes out a mortgage they can't afford to pay back, are they just being held back?
Because they have so much student loan debt, and you can't even file for bankruptcy on that debt. So I think it's a really important step to make, and it would definitely drastically help the economy because you free up capital, and these people will spend this money on things that they need.
Yeah, it's all good. Taking money from volunteering other people's money and giving it to other people it's totally fine so long as the economy benefits.
So it's absolutely...
Again, this was the argument during the 19th century, during the abolitionist movement, when people were calling to abolish slavery because slavery is immoral and fundamentally anti-American. If America is founded on this idea that all men are created equal and have inalienable rights, including the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then the idea of being someone else's property and bound by chains and being forced to work for other people, that's kind of in conflict with the first idea. But then the people that wanted to maintain slavery argued, well, we can't afford this. This isn't economically feasible. Americans can't afford to pay more for textiles. They can't afford to pay more for clothes and cotton goods. And all these freed slaves, they're going to flood the labor market and they're going to drive down wages. This is going to be bad for the economy.
So it's absolutely something we should do. And if you really stop and think about it, like the idea of everybody takes for granted that we have public, elementary school, middle school, high school. Everybody takes that for granted. K to 12, free. Free at the point of service, paid for via taxes.
Well, then it's not free. It's amazing how this guy gets away with this nonsense.
Everybody takes that for granted because it's just how it is. So why is it an insane idea to think, why not just do K to 16 or preschool to 16? That's just...
Why not take it further? Why not guarantee it all the way to PhD? Why not guarantee multiple PhDs? What if I want to get a PhD in medicine, a PhD in astrophysics, and I also want to get my law degree, and I also want to get a bachelor's in philosophy? I want to study until I'm dead. Why not guarantee that at on the taxpayer's dime? Of course, Kyle might say something like, oh, well, that's too radical and ridiculous. You're being too extreme. Meanwhile, he listens to a Marxist goof like Richard Wolff.
That's just the logical next step. You know, I mean, our public school system is wonderful. It's great to have public schools.
Oh, yeah, our public school system, so wonderful. He thinks our public school system is so wonderful. So let's go off on a nice tangent, folks. Let's talk about how wonderful this public school we have in America is. So let's go to a city like Detroit, who spends $15,500 per student per year on their public school systems. You think on $15,500 per student per year, you could have a classroom with just 10 kids and they would have a $155,000 budget for the entire year? You could pay the teacher a nice salary like $80,000 and then have another $75,000 to spend on school supplies and building maintenance and all that stuff. Heck, 80,000. Take $8,000 out of each of the paychecks for the kids, out of each of the $15,000. Give that to the teacher. Give every kid an iPad, $600. So that's $8,600. Now these kids have about another $7,000 for notebooks and pencils and building maintenance. However much the electric bill is going to be. You'd think they'd be getting amazing education with this money, right? So $15,500 per student per year in Detroit. And let's see what they're getting for this. The percentage of students whose scores indicate proficiency in math in Detroit were 15.7% of third graders, 19% of fourth graders, 17% of fifth graders, 14% of sixth graders, 13% of seventh graders, and about 11% of eighth graders in Detroit were proficient in math. Does that sound great to everyone? Here, let's go to another district. Let's go to Chicago, who spends $13,000 per student per year on education. You think, man, they must have some amazing schools in Chicago. 21% of Chicago fourth graders performed well enough to be classified as proficient or better in grade level reading, versus 34% of fourth graders nationally. So 34% of fourth graders are proficient at fourth grade reading. National. Does this sound like a great education system to everyone? 27% of Chicago fourth graders performed well enough to be classified as proficient or better in grade level math, versus 42% of fourth graders nationally. 42% of fourth graders are proficient in math. What a wonderful education system, but especially in Chicago where they spend $13,000 per student per year, just 27% proficient in math. What a great public school systems we have. What great public schools we have here in America. Let's jump over to, where is this? Milwaukee? Yes, Milwaukee spends $14,200 per student per year on education, and 18% of Milwaukee's fourth graders scored proficient or better in math, and 11% of Milwaukee's eighth graders scored proficient or better in math. And I have plenty of stats for each of these districts, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to bore you with all these stats. And let's jump over to Washington, D.C., who apparently a city that spends $29,000 per student per year on education. At least they did in 2007, and 17% of DC 8th graders performed well enough to be categorized as proficient in grade level reading. And this doesn't mention, the schools in the South that are whitewashing the Civil War in their textbooks, and all these schools in Texas that are spending millions of dollars on football stadiums, state-of-the-art football stadiums. But hey, according to good old Kyle, our public education system in America is just wonderful.
It really, in many ways, it serves as an equalizer and really does give people economic opportunity that they wouldn't have otherwise.
So, Kyle says that public education serves as an equalizer for economic opportunity. So let me get this straight. We've had public education, K through 12, for about 100 years, but even if you want to fast forward to the post-civil rights movement, for about 40 years, we've had K through 12 education. If K through 12 public education is a great equalizer, then why does everyone suddenly need to go to college to be able to compete in the economy?
That's a mystery.
And if education is a great equalizer, then shouldn't all of these college grads who have this student loan debt, shouldn't they have more economic opportunities? Shouldn't they presumably be making more money? If so, then why do they need to be bailed out of their student loans?
So any argument that somebody would make against free college, just for the record here, is an argument that would also apply against free high school.
Yes, Kyle is absolutely right here. Let's privatize education. The proper role of government is to protect individual rights and property rights. It's not to teach your kids their ABCs.
But you'll notice people never make that next step because they realize how absurd and regressive that is. So they're like, they just use the arguments they use against free college, and they don't say, well, this would also apply to free high school. Are you also against free high school?
Yes, and it's not free high school. Someone has to pay for it. And it's amazing that, the birth control pill has existed since the 60s. Abortion has been legal since the early 70s. We have condoms and many forms of birth control available to everyone. In other words, family planning is easier than ever. So if you can't afford to have kids, if you can't afford to educate your kids, then don't have kids. It's not my responsibility. It's not the taxpayer's responsibility to pay for your kids' education.
You're goddamn right.
So, obviously I love the idea of free college. I love the idea of canceling student loan debt. And what Richard Wolff is doing here, and it's incredibly important that he does this, is say, this isn't just like a pie-in-the-sky lefty idea. This is all.
Oh yes, this Marxist economist, this avowed Marxist. Richard Wolff. He's not a radical or anything. Don't worry, people.
This is also like a very serious idea, and from an economics perspective, it has many unintended consequences that are benefits for the rest of the economy. And to view it simply as, because there's this default.
Even though Richard Wolff explicitly said that some people will definitely lose in the economy.
Sense you get.
Kyle must have missed that part.
And you listen to a lot of politicians and you watch mainstream media. And the sense is, well, we don't do it like that right now, so it's crazy to even consider that we change it. And it's like, wow, what a weird approach to analyzing the world. Like, things are the way they are, therefore they must make sense.
You just used the status quo as an argument. Like, hey, we have public education, let's have more public education. And now he's saying that the status quo isn't an argument?
No. What a giant fallacy that is. That's like, when it comes to insulin, costs $6 to make it, but we sell it for $360 or about that in the US.
Yeah, I wonder if that has anything to do with the FDA locking out competition.
That's not like written in the laws of nature that it has to be like that. That's like a bunch of corrupt backroom deals that handcuffed the ability to negotiate that made it like that.
Yeah, you're probably right. It probably happens at the FDA.
Pharmaceutical companies just tell you what you have to pay and you have no choice. The idea that that's not changeable, because that's...
Yeah, or completely unregulated, laissez-faire market in medicine.
How it is now, it's silly. In the same way that people saying, we can't do anything to address the student loan debt crisis, because that's just how it is.
Yeah, and we shouldn't.
That's a non-point. You're not making an argument. So some great stuff here from Richard Wolff. He has a lot of great stuff, and I'm happy that somebody's out there making the economic arguments as well. There's... many people make the moral argument, the ethical argument, but It's
Yeah, I'm focusing on the moral and ethical argument. But yeah, thank goodness we have a brilliant economist like Richard Wolff, and everyone pay attention to Richard Wolff because he's becoming more popular amongst these big name lefties like Kyle Kulinski on YouTube. And you know, today Kyle calls himself a social democrat and claims that he doesn't want socialism or communism. He just wants a few new, small, few trillion-dollar welfare programs like Medicare for All and the Green Leap Forward and tuition-free college and cancellation of existing student loan debt and a living wage and probably some other nonsense. But let's see if Kyle ever gets his way. Let's see if these things ever come into fruition, because I want to see if Kyle, if he just, dusts his hands and says, all right, America, that's enough socialism, we're good here. Or will Kyle continue to get pushed around and influenced by Marxist scum like Richard Wolff? Stay tuned to find out.